Hello everyone. Today I would like to talk to you all about Ludwig van Beethoven, one of the most famous and influential of all composers, who was a crucial figure in the transition between the classical and romantic eras in Western art music. We will be talking about Beethoven's life, his biography, the style of his music, and how he has influenced other composers throughout the years, the differences in his music, depending on the period of time, his significant moments as a human being, and how this was related with his characteristics as a composer in his pieces. Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany in 1770, and is widely considered the greatest composers of all the times. Beethoven's body of musical composition stands with Shakespeare, placed in the outer limits of human accomplishment. Despite his extraordinary output of beautiful music, Beethoven was lonely and frequently miserable throughout his life. Short-tempered, absent-minded, greedy, and suspicious to the point of paranoia. But how does Beethoven's quality of life affect in the way he composed the different pieces? In fact, Beethoven's music was certainly influenced by the different experiences he had to live throughout his life. His talent for the piano was soon realized, and his first public performance was at the age of 8. He seemed to be the next child prodigy, another Mozart. Although he was employed as a court musician, was certainly not a satisfying relationship for Beethoven. It turns out that events in Beethoven's life greatly affect his writing. Because of this, Beethoven's musical output is very episodic. There are three main periods in Beethoven's life, known simply as the early, middle, and late periods. We can say that in 1792, Beethoven relocated to Vienna. This is the beginning of his early period, which lasts until 18th. During this time, Beethoven quickly made a name for himself as a virtuoso pianist. His composition during this period consisted mainly of works for his main instrument, which was the piano. This was also the time where Beethoven's hearing began to deteriorate. However, he tried to hide this fact for those around him. Later, Beethoven quit the classical forms of the previous century and set out for a more expressive musical voice, which was the Romantic. In fact, he is generally known as the father of the Romantic era. His musical imagination began to grow beyond that of the piano. Some say that this middle period was Beethoven's greatest. It certainly was his most productive. In about a decade, Beethoven produced countless masterpieces. Finally, in 1809, however, his musical output began to drop, possibly in connection to his declining health and mental state. Beethoven's output was mostly null until 1818. At this point, he was completely deaf and slightly mad. The late period saw the compositions of Beethoven's largest works. As I said before, Beethoven was a crucial figure between the classical and romantic eras in Western music, and throughout his career he composed a significant number of works that demonstrated his growing range, talent, and maturity. Beethoven is a proto-romantic composer. Without deserting the fundamental stylistic language of the classical style, he created the blueprint to the romantic composition. To a certain extent, he added to classical music values like the pursuit of elegant restraint, the strictly calculated means of development, or the idea of using thematic contrast as a means of achieving momentum. His works came to sit as meta-narratives, rhetorically fluid and complex, and this treatment became a prototype of romantic musicians' programmatic intent in composition, and the idea of conflict and resolution as a means of propelling musical content. Another question we can say in this topic is, what aspects of Beethoven's music relate to these two eras, which are very different in style and structure? Well, Beethoven expanded the classical understanding of the sonata. In Beethoven's sonata movements, the themes are catalyzed for movement, holding with nuclei of conflict and tension that can only be resolved through an organic motion. Ludwig van Beethoven was a complex man consumed by a towering genius, all the more remarkable for the deafness with which he struggled. One of the most surprising facts about Beethoven is that he was deaf. how can a musician, a composer, lack what we would imagine to be his most important sense? People have always been interested in his personality, in his life, the way he lived during 52 years being a genius. Beethoven was an introvert, not an extrovert person. He had one of the richest inner lives humankind has ever known. Beethoven's personal life was troubled by his deafness, which led him to contemplate suicide. But then he decided that he would live for his art and for his music, and the entire world still thanked him for this. Beethoven was often irascible and he suffered from bipolar disorder. He had a close and devoted circle of friends around his life, though. Another important part of his personality had to do with the woman and love in his life. With this talent and his larger personality, Beethoven was popular among women. Although he never married, he dedicated such pieces as the Moonlight Sonata and Für Elise to the woman in his life. Perhaps he was terrified and furious about losing the world of sound, and perhaps he was completely worried about the need to create. Despite his behavior, he was admired and respected for the music that poured from him. He knew that it moved its listeners to tears, but he responded, "Composers don't cry, composers are made of fire." Beethoven is and will always be remembered for his music and his ability to compose wonderful pieces despite his health and all things that were happening around him by the late time of his life. In conclusion, Ludwig van Beethoven is a really important person in our history, not only in music history but also in the whole concept of history, because he helped change the face of music forever, writing many symphonies, string quartets, and operas that can still be heard and seen. There are many people who have felt inspired by him to become musicians and writers. Ludwig van Beethoven was and remains today an influential figure in the history of classical music and the creator of the wonderful Romantic era. His influence on the last 15 years of music is unquestioned. As a musician, I can say that Beethoven's music has played a huge role in the life of millions of music lovers around the world that today and always we thank him for giving us the opportunity to play incredible and perfect pieces that combines the elements of the life of a man who lived to make music. Thank you all very much.